Welcome to Podcash, the portable professional development podcast from CASH alumni. CASH alumni is the fastest growing association of professionals in care, health, and education, and we're happy to have you here. This is where you'll hear from specialists and experts from across our network. Here's what's coming up.
The educators who are going to be just starting out on their 30, 40-year career, if I can just shift their thinking because of something that I've said from my personal story, if I can just get somebody just to shift, to have that neuroaffirming, neuro-inclusive lens to the behaviours, the play, the development that they're seeing in front of them. But I think the personal experience does add weight, I guess, to what I'm saying because it is that lived experience.
Let's jump in to this week's episode.
My name is Cheryl Warren and I am an award-winning trainer and consultant specialising in neurodiversity in the early years. I have a 30-year background within the early years and childcare sector, and I now work with predominantly nurseries and schools up and down the UK in delivering true neuro-inclusive practice, really understanding what that is and how to execute it and embed it to really support the neurodivergent children within our early years settings. I also speak at some of the national sector events and I'm just starting to go abroad as well. So that's very exciting.
So you say you've got 30 years of experience. Do you mind just kind of talking a little bit through your journey from sort of how you started through to where you are now?
Definitely. How long have you got?
Not 30 years.
In a very quick overview, childcare was all I wanted to do. I wanted to work with children. When I first started many, many moons ago, it was the NNEB. That was the route we needed to go down. That was the only qualification available. So that's what I did. I embarked on my NNEB. I'm very proud to still wave that banner and wave that flag. I wanted to be a nanny, and that's how I started. I started out nannying for a couple of families local to me and absolutely adored it. Then shifted a little bit. I went from working with affluent families, obviously those that can employ a nanny, to working with more vulnerable families in a family centre. So I was working with parents who were struggling to parent, maybe because of their own background, their own life as a child being parented. We've kind of seen that cycle lots before, haven't we? Children who had been abused, children been neglected. That's my kind of first introduction really to children with disabilities, neurodivergent children. I hadn't come across them before in either my training or in work previously. So that was my first introduction really. Doing lots of work alongside social services, court report, supervised contact for children with their parents. Then moved on to local authority support. So I was a childminding development officer for just under 7 years. I think it was 6-7 years. I was working and supporting those that called the local authority and said, I want to be a childminder. How do I do that? And then supporting them through their journey to become an Ofsted registered childminder, because there wasn't agencies back then. It was Ofsted. That was the route. And then supporting them with their career going forward. Got the kind of bug for training and teaching because there was elements of that in the role. So then went on and did my qualifications to be a teacher of post-compulsory education. So working in further education. So I was supporting and teaching students kind of back to the beginning for me, really. I was now the teacher teaching the level 2 and level 3s within a college space. Also trained as an assessor. So I then became freelance and did lots of assessing. So I was kind of going everywhere really. And then went into nurseries as quality and compliance officer within nurseries, Senko, lead Senko. I worked for a childminder agency for a while as an inspector and quality inspector for them and lead Senko there too. I've done some work with NDNA as a quality inspector. And then it was kind of the way that my personal life and professional life was going. Things shifted and the focus became on SEN. I have now, it was about 3 years ago, set up my company doing what I am doing now. And I absolutely love it. It's taken me to places I never thought it would. And I love what I do. It's having impact, I guess. And it's making a difference. And that's why I'm still in 30 years on.
You said that working in that family centre was your sort of first touch point with children who may be neurodivergent or may specifically be struggling with being neurodivergent in a non-neurodivergent world. So what was it about working in that environment or about the stuff that you've done after that that made you think, this is hard, I want to do more of this?
Yeah, I love a challenge. Yeah, it was. It was my first introduction. There were twin boys who were non-speaking and had quite complex needs. And like I said, that was my first introduction. And I remember I was doing my level 4 advanced childcare qualification at the time as a distance learner. And I remember writing in my assignment, this was before I'd worked there, but I remember writing in my assignment that, there are children with autism. Now, obviously, we kind of shift the language now, we know that, but I spelt it ORTISM. And I remember the coming back, I look back on it and kind of, no, they crossed that out and put, no, actually, autistic, AU. So I knew nothing. I kind of didn't know how even to spell it, let alone how to effectively support our autistic children. I was working with speech and language therapists. I was running some speech and language groups. And I think it was those children where life was tricky. Families were finding it tricky. Even when I was working with the local authority and with the childminders, it was that was kind of coming up too. And we've got this child that's doing this, Cheryl, or this child that we think this. And it was, okay, I kind of feel, not sure why, but I feel drawn. I then had my own children and at 2.5 started to identify some of those wonders in my son and thought, okay, here we go then. My eldest son was diagnosed autistic and with sensory processing disorder when he was 6. So it kind of became personal. This is not just a professional mission. This is a personal mission. I mean, early years for him was tricky because we didn't know all the traits, but you have to figure things out as a family, don't you? And kind of work your way around how it feels to now be raising a neurodivergent child and the emotions that go with that. Like you said, raising a neurodivergent child in a neurotypical world where my son isn't always understood, accepted, supported, celebrated for his strengths and his capabilities. It's always, he can't do this and he can't do that. And well, he does this funny. And why does he do that behavior? It's that focus on the negative all of the time. I chose a childminder for him purely because I felt that he just wouldn't cope in the bigger space. But then when the shift came and the transition came for school, that's when your eyes become widened to things not quite being how they should be. And then the fight starts for support. The fight starts to be heard. The fight starts to advocate for your child. It's funny how I felt drawn. And then that's how it's turned out for me in terms of my own parenting journey. Maybe the universe was telling me something to prepare me. Maybe the cells in the body were kind of gearing me up for what I was about to produce. I don't know. It's definitely now that personal mission as well as the professional experiences that I draw on that keeps me going.
What are some of those things that you saw as a professional working in that children's centre for that first time where you were like, oh, this is different, or these challenges are different, or this family are struggling with something because of this other thing?
It's a range of things. There's a great line that, once you've met one autistic person, you've met one autistic person. So it's called a spectrum for a reason, because you can have individuals with, if we're just talking about autism for a moment, we can have an individual diagnosed as autistic who is going to need lifelong support, who may well not be able to live independently, who may well be non-speaking, and who will need that 24/7 care and support. And then you will also have individuals, and if, I don't always necessarily like to kind of just hone in on it, but even if we just think about some of the celebrities that we know about at the moment, Elon Musk and Steve Jobs, very successful in terms of career and financial success and have relationships and are diagnosed autistic. So it's about understanding the individual trait and how a neurodivergent diagnosis presents for that individual. So it's always about getting to know the individual. And when we're talking about our little people, it's where you start to observe difference. And people always, the kind of common phrases that are used are, the child is not doing this, or the child is not meeting expectations, not meeting developmental milestones, always on the negative. We need to shift that. What differences am I observing? Because that's what it is. It's different. But we've placed difference with deficit. We've linked difference to problem. We've linked difference to oh, they need to be cured and fixed. So they're no longer doing this because that's not working for us in terms of a compliance-based system. We need our people to comply. We need all of our people to be able to do the same thing, to all sit in a classroom, to all be able to finish their work at the same time and not need a sensory break or extra time to do something because that's not working for the greater group. But it's about observing differences. And certainly the differences that we will often see in our younger children are differences around social context. So struggling with connecting with other children, maybe that preference to play on their own, the children that you would describe as, oh, they're not sharing, they're not taking turns, those kind of social elements, and not necessarily following those social cues or the things that neurotypical brains will kind of go, oh, okay, we've done that a couple of times. So I know that when that song comes on or when the teacher stands up and kind of says, oh, we know it's tidy up time. Okay, I have to tidy up. That's the cue to do this next thing. So some of those they may not pick up on. They will have different communication preferences. For some of our children, my son, for example, was very articulate at 2.5, 3 years old. He could join in this podcast quite happily with us, join in with that conversation. But place him in a room with his peers and he wouldn't really know what to say, how to say it, what to do. We'll have children that have a communication preference of signing or gestures or using visuals or leading you where it is that they want to go. We will see differences in play. Our children prefer to play solitary or parallel play, so alongside rather than with, in terms of that social play or cooperative play. They may well play because of their sensory needs. They may play, you may see more play more around their schemas and those patterns of play. You may well see children organising and categorising in their play. And it's not just kind of, oh, they're not speaking, they must be autistic. Oh, they're lining their cars up, they must be autistic. It's also about tuning in, certainly when we're talking about our little children, it's about tuning into what your parents are saying. The children that are struggling to fall asleep or not staying asleep, the parents that are saying that they're screaming and having these meltdowns when they get home. Are they talking about children at home when they're out and about in public or noisy situations, the hands are going over their ears or they're getting agitated or frustrated? Are they the children where parents describe, I can't get my child to eat anything other than chicken nuggets and rice cakes? Tuning in to all of that to see the bigger picture, to kind of go, oh, okay, 95% of autistic have sensory processing challenges. And they're quite often the first things that we see in our children. So it's picking up on those sensory differences when the room gets too noisy or things are, strange or big, strong smells and too much visual stimulus. All of those things. So it's building the full picture, looking at the child in a holistic way to kind of go, okay, maybe all of these differences are telling us something. Maybe we need to tune into these because therefore, do we now need to provide some accommodations and adaptations? Do we need to be more flexible? Do we need to offer something different? Do we need to audit our space? Do we need to have a conversation where we might have to bring other professionals in? So there's a range of things because neurodivergence, we've just been talking about autism, but we've also got ADHD, we've also got PDA, we've also got dyslexia, dyscalculia, dyspraxia. All of those fall under the neurodivergent banner too. But with all of them, it would be differences in play, differences in behaviour, and differences in behavioural responses to situations. And those are the things that we would start to pick up on in the early stages.
You talked about the parents being the ones to notice those differences or those challenges. Often, do you actually find parents feel like the home reaction is the normal bit and the school stuff is the wrong bit? In my conversations with families and practitioners working in nurseries and schools, there are a lot of parents who don't realise that they are neurodivergent until their child struggles with some things at school. It turns out that actually that whole household is neurodivergent and that it hasn't been a struggle because everyone in that house's brain works in the same way.
Absolutely. And what we are finding now is that there are so many adults getting their diagnosis because they have learnt that maybe the way they are is different to everybody else, but they've learnt that through their children. And it has picked up a lot. And I've also noticed it not just with parents, but with the educators. They know that they've found things tricky and they know they've found things difficult. Maybe that's how things are at home. That's the family life that they have. And it's not until they've come into early years where they've got a staff room and staff meetings full of other educators talking about these children of difference, these things that they're seeing. And, maybe we need to have the conversation about a referral. Maybe we need to talk to mum about, what's going on at home. And they're kind of, oh, okay. Didn't know that was a thing. I thought it was just it was me. And I've had conversations with adults that go, what, you don't think like that? That isn't a challenge for you. Oh, it's just me then. Okay. Then it opens up that conversation. And there's lots of conversation around, certainly, and I'm not here to dig at teachers. Teachers are in a really tricky situation. We know the challenges: money, staffing, expectations, demands, government pushes on various different agendas. But it's not until we get into that school space where we have to comply, we have to sit, we have to listen, we have to join in, that then these differences are raised, because we're now in a space where those differences don't fit. But what we're trying to do is to fit. It's round peg, square box, or the other way around, whichever way around it is, isn't it? It's trying to fit the children into it. Now we know more. So once we know more, we can do more, right? So now we know more because we're listening to the neurodivergent community, and we have to listen more, quite frankly. And we also have to learn and kind of go, okay, so yes, it's worked for years and years and years. Look at you, Dawn. Everything's fine. You've got a good job. You've got, roof over your head. It's clearly not been that bad for you, But actually now we're kind of listening and going, actually, it really was. And the impact has been huge. And the impact is still happening now. I've got friends 30, 40 years old, but they're still impacted by what happened to them as a child. So because we now know more, we have to do more. So just because these overwhelming classrooms and children sitting at desks all in a row and all being given the same tasks and the same behavior management strategies and all of these things have always worked before, but yet they're now having children in their classroom that are going, no, it's really not fine. And that's where the challenges come, because we've now got children that aren't behaving appropriately. And then the challenges come from there. What we also find as well is that in early years, we've got the educator saying that the reason the child has experienced success with us is because of the way our settings are set up. They are free flow. They are led by the child. They are following the child's interests. We have obviously, a higher level of ratio than they do in school. We've got the flexibility for indoors, for outdoors, for forests, for all sorts of stuff going on. So the child has thrived in the early years space, but the early years setting knows full well that they're not going to in a school space. So therefore they're asking for support. They're doing an EHCP request to get the support in place for school, because they already know that things are going to be more of a challenge for the child. We know it's about environments, it's an expectation, and we need to shift thinking from the school space to better support our children, so that parents like me don't have to go in and constantly battle and fight, because it's exhausting.
This is Podcash, brought to you by Cash Alumni. For job search and careers advice in care, health and education, why not try our state-of-the-art SkillsMiner AI tool? SkillsMiner is under the Careers tab of cashalumni.org.uk. That's cashalumni.org.uk.
What do you think your personal experience as a parent has impacted on your professional approach and how you view the practice?
I mean, we always talk, it's kind of the phrase about lived experiences. I think bringing together my lived experiences, I'm not just giving support and guidance and training on a textbook. 16 and 9, my youngest son's dyslexic and really struggling at school. It was a phone call just this week. We're 2 weeks left of the end of term, and it's still phone calls and conversations with the teacher. The comments and the feedback that I get back from educators who hear me talk, if I'm doing a keynote or a presentation, it's not intentional, but I'll often get them coming to me in tears and kind of saying, I just wish that I had somebody like you to help me when my children were younger. I wish that I had somebody that I could connect like you that could have helped me fight. Or thank you, I feel like I'm not on my own. There are other people out there that are living this. And it brings that level of passion. My children are way out of early years now. They're past it. And quite frankly, I haven't got a frigging clue what I'm supposed to be doing with them right now. 16 and 9. Someone help me. Don't know. Once they turned 5, I went into panic. What do I do now? But if I can have an impact on the children now, or on the educators who are going to be just starting out on their 30, 40-year career, if I can just shift their thinking because of something that I've said from my personal story. I'll often share a poem that my son reads out and it has real impact, and just hearing it from a child's perspective. If I can just get somebody just to shift, to have that neuroaffirming, neuro-inclusive lens to the behaviors, the play, the development that they're seeing in front of them. But I think the personal experience does add weight, I guess, to what I'm saying, because of it is that lived experience.
There's quite a lot of expectations and pressure on parents and families to just know everything there probably is to know about their child. But obviously it's not as simple as that. So how would you say practitioners can help families sort of navigate a world that doesn't quite understand neurodivergence and also puts pressure on them to know everything there is to know?
I love it. All the parenting books go out of the window completely. And you, in terms of how you can support a parent, the main thing for me is connection and trust and safety, as well as providing spaces for your children where you are connecting with your children. You are that trustful and trusted adult, and you are providing that emotionally safe space for your children. The same has to apply for the family. I talk a lot about your narrative, and we have to shift the narrative. So even when you are doing a show round with a new family, like me, you know, my son was 2.5 when I started to recognize some of those emerging traits, but I didn't say it out loud. I couldn't say it out loud. That was too scary. If I take myself back to that moment and I'm taking my 2.5-year-old round a nursery or a childminder setting to have a look, to kind of see whether or not I'm going to leave my child here, what are they telling me about special educational needs and disability? What is their narrative around SEN? So are they talking to me about, you know, if we identify concerns, if your child starts to show us some red flags, if your children are not meeting the developmental milestones, then we'll have a conversation. I'd be like, no, thanks. Because already you're telling me that there's a problem. So if on that show round, you're talking to me about uniqueness of children, and you're talking to me about differences and the range of differences that you see in your children, and how you support and embrace those differences in the children that you have, and how you work really closely with families to understand the differences in their child's development, and that you will support them and advocate for them all the way through that journey. I'm there. You've got me right from that moment, because I'm already seeing these differences in my child. So I'm already feeling that you are going to be a trusted adult for me. And kind of phrases like, you know, the parents are in denial. They're not ready to have the conversation yet. So therefore, we can't help the child because we need the parent's permission to make the referral. We are trying to navigate a really tricky journey. And we have so many pressures from the world, from family members, from society that tells us that our children should be behaving a certain way, should be playing a certain way, should be eating meals like everybody else, because that's what we do. And life is different. And we know very early on that life's going to be different. And that's really scary. And I need people around me who I can rant with, people that I can cry with, people that I can laugh, just awful situations with, but know that I'm not going to be judged for it. I need to know that I'm not going to be criticized and judged as a parent because my child still sleeps in my bed, because that's the only way as a family we get some sleep. My child still has a dummy at 4, because that's the only way that I can support my child to stay calm and regulated. That my child does probably have excess time on a tablet and will watch TV with a tablet, because that's the only way that I can get food into my child. And as a parent, that's the main thing for me. So don't judge me, don't criticize me, don't blame me, understand and support me, because life's hard enough as it is. And I need to be provided with time and space and understanding as a parent. And I need you to work with me, not against me. And I'll get there then. I will get there in that part of my journey. But even if I don't, you can still support my child. You can still provide a safe space. You can still provide a low arousal environment. You can still provide a safe space for my child to retreat to. You can still provide sensory breaks for my child. You don't need to have referrals for those things. You can still add in accommodation as an adaptation so my child can experience success and thrive with you. Just take me on that journey and support me as well.
That sounds magic. I think that stuff around like the walk around, the show around, and the way that I could really feel the difference in the language that you use between those two things. And again, it might be because my brain's a bit weird, but it sounds to me like the stuff that you're talking about just sounds like a sensible thing for all children, not just neurodivergent children, because everyone's brain is different and we'll all work better with different things or in different environments. Does it not just sound sensible that the things you're talking about should be for everybody, not just a special case for people who really need them?
Absolutely. And people say, well, how do we set up a space for neurodivergent children that still supports our other children? If you can create a safe environment that meets the unique and individual needs of every child that you've got, surely that's the way to go, right? And that's why we do it so well in early years, because we do follow the children's lead. We do have that flexibility. But absolutely, we need to embrace difference. We need to understand uniqueness. What we're fighting against is a compliance-based education system. That's the problem. We've got standardized tests for our children. My youngest has just had to do a multiplication test. He's not got a standardized brain. So why is he being forced to do standardized tests? I mean, even my eldest just finished his GCSEs, but it's all the last 6 months of his education has been how to pass a question. It's been past papers. It's right. When you sit down for your English literature paper 2, question 4 is going to ask you this. This is how you answer it. Where's the creativity? Where's the problem solving? Where is the challenge that is going to allow him to expand his brain and have his own thinking? No, we need to create a robot because our education system, our current national curriculum is so old school. It was built to get people out of the war, back into the factories, to get the money back in the country, and it hasn't changed. What that's doing is filtering down to early years where we're now at 3 years old having to get children school ready. I can't bear that either. That has to stop. You know, the children need to learn to sit down at a carpet and the children need to learn how to do. No, they don't. No, they don't. Early years foundation stage goes up to reception. Quite frankly, it should go up to year 3, 4, 5 in terms of the way that we set up our classrooms. We're not allowing for creativity. We are not allowing for uniqueness. And I've had conversations with teachers who say, Cheryl, I can't because I have to teach this and I can only spend a couple of days on that before I have to move on to the next thing. It's not working. We have so many children out of school at the moment. The term is school refuser. Our children are not refusing to go to school. They would love to be at school, but the school are placing barriers. It's not that they won't go to school. They can't go to school. There has to be that big shift. But yeah, creating environments where uniqueness is embraced and difference is embraced is definitely the way forward.
You mentioned this phrase before about looking at things through a neuroaffirming lens. Can you just explain a little bit what that means and why is it important to use it in practice?
Yeah, so that neuroaffirming lens is seeing, like I said earlier, seeing difference as just that. You are affirming different neurotypes, that there are those different neuro-identities. Affirming meaning accepting, embracing, celebrate. And it's not to take away the support. It's not about saying, oh, yeah, let's celebrate in terms of, the challenges and it's providing support because we understand that there are those differences. So neuroaffirming is understanding the differences. It's making sure that your ethos, your vision, your environments, your practice is coming from a strength-based perspective, looking at what our children can do, not focusing on the can't. So focus on the can, not the can't. It's understanding identity. It's creating spaces where our children have that real sense of belonging. And Brené Brown talks about the difference to belonging is fitting in. And fitting in is where we mask and we fit in and we kind of be how we need to be. And we don't want to diversify from that because we might get found out that we're different. But then we go home and we just go, ugh. and we melt down and we take the mask off and it's exhausting and we get to burnout. So it's embracing difference, coming from a strength-based perspective, seeing difference as okay. Our children play differently. It's okay. Our children do things differently. That's okay. Understanding behavior and coming from looking at a behavior with a neuroaffirming lens. So understanding the behaviors that we're seeing in front of us as a potential need for control, connection, or safety. And when I'm talking about safety, I'm talking about the fight, flight, freeze, fawn response to safety. Understanding the behaviors that could be linked to a sensory need, an unmet sensory need, not the child has to stop doing this or the child has to be excluded because they're behaving this way. Understand why and support them in understanding that why, because quite often the why is something that we can do. We can shift routine, we can shift environment, we can shift expectation, we can provide accommodations, we can provide adaptions. It's affirming, it's acknowledging that there are those different neurotypes and supporting and meeting our children right where they are with that neurotype, not forcing them to enter a neurotypical world. It's saying, do you know what? I'm going to come into your world and I'm going to support you right where you are. That's neuroaffirming. So there's lots to it, but in essence, it's saying, yeah, I get you, I hear you, I understand you, and I'm going to do everything that I can to enable you to thrive and experience.
The idea that there's loads you can do, even if you don't understand what the different neurotypes are, you don't have to know that this is what might happen for this autism, or that this person's got ADHD. You don't even have to know what neurotype that person has.
Yeah, we don't have to have a degree in neuroscience to do this stuff.
The answer to a lot of things is nosiness. So that asking why, I think, is something that some of us do fairly naturally. We want to know the why behind all of the things so that we can do the best job that we can in answering whatever it is that we're being asked to do. People asking, why is a child acting like this? Why do they need this thing? Why is this change so disruptive? Why is this happening?
It's being a curious educator. And that's what I want people to be. I talk about behavior detectives. Go and find the clues. Ask the questions. Seek support. Why is that child biting? Why is that child pushing everything off the table? Why does that child go around and just randomly push other children over? There was no trigger. Why did they do it? There's always a reason. Be curious. Find out why. And if you don't know the answer, ask the questions, because we don't know what we don't know. But once we do know, let's do something with it.
Back in the olden days, we were quite accepting of people who were a bit weird or who did things a certain way. And I feel like if you look, you mentioned Elon Musk earlier on as an example. There's loads of things that as a society, we'll look at Elon Musk and we'll go, that's weird. But nobody, until he came out and said, I have Asperger's or I am autistic when he did his Saturday Night Live, like nobody for a minute went, oh, that's because he's got this thing and it makes him weird. They were just like, successful people are sometimes dead weird. And we just sort of accepted it. When you watch Mary Poppins and you get that really old, cantankerous old man who runs the bank, no one said to him, you're going to have to try and be better with people. They said, that's okay. He's the money man and he's really good at numbers. He's just really grumpy. And that's fine because he can be really grumpy because he's dead good at numbers. And I feel like we've lost that a little bit and we sort of expect everyone to be good at everything. So as well as being curious and trying to figure things out, is there an element of just letting people be?
Absolutely. Let people be. I talk a lot about allowing individuals to be their true, authentic self. And what I'm hearing from friends and others that have got a late diagnosis themselves is that they're now trying to figure out who they are because they haven't been allowed to be. And now they've got their diagnosis. They've kind of forgotten who they are because they've had to fit in. And that's really sad that we have stifled these individuals because we as predominantly neurotypical society have said the way that you do it is wrong. The way that you do it is not working for us. So you need to change. So it's almost like a process of grief and bereavement, but coming out the other side and kind of going, I can now be my true authentic self. I say it to my son, I'm never going to allow you to use your autistic diagnosis as a reason to be an idiot or a reason to be nasty. If you're going to use it as an excuse to just be a nasty human being, then no. But you also need to embrace who you are and allow yourself to be who you are so that you can live your life authentically. Don't use it as an excuse, because it's not. And I have these conversations with my husband. What is my son being just that really awful, horrid teenager? And what's the autism? Which one is it? Because he's got older children. No, that's him being a teenager. I'm like, do not behave like that. That is not acceptable. And he'll come to me and go, no, other teenagers wouldn't do that. Right. So we deal with things differently and we support him in the struggle with whatever behavior it is that he's demonstrated. But yeah, allow people to be. The world would be a very boring place if we were all the same, surely. But we need to embrace that difference. But embracing difference is not at the expense of providing those accommodations and that support where people need it. There is a difference, and we need to acknowledge the Elon Musks and those that are the academics and those that are the Sheldon Coopers of the world that kind of, they're very smart, they're really clever, but they still need support in other areas of their life. They don't have higher or lower support needs. They're not high functioning, low functioning, because it depends what situation they're in. So it's not saying, well, you're clever at math, you're good at literacy, so you don't need the support. And that's where the schools kind of, because they're ticking the academic mark.
This is quite a big question. It's sort of expanding on what we've just talked about. But what do you think are some practical ways, things that we can do to create more inclusive and supportive spaces, not just for neurodivergent children, but just for all children?
In terms of education, it's a bigger task. But in terms of everyday, I would always start with environmental audit. I would be looking at, what does this environment look like? What does it smell like? What are the touch points? Last Saturday was my youngest son's school fair. So we've gone to the school fair, and because of the horrific weather we are having this summer, the majority of the stalls were inside. These days, you don't tend to get to go into the classrooms very often, but we were allowed to go into class. But I just turned to my husband and I said, how do children function in this space? Every display board around was either green, purple, or yellow. It was filled with so much, it might sound a bit strange, but it was noisy. The display boards were noisy. You also had string from the ceiling, which had children's artwork on it. You had displays and posters and some of children's work up on the windows, blocking the natural light coming in. We've got the fluorescent lights on in the classroom. The children are sat down on a rug that is a blue-based rug with different shapes of different colours that are obviously their spots that they're sat on. You've got the whiteboard. Above the whiteboard are all of the phonic letters, numbers, everything. How do we expect our neurodivergent children to be calm, settled, and regulated in that place? So a quick, easy win is to do an environmental audit and go, oh, okay, maybe this is a bit much. And we need to strip it back and we need to think about low arousal spaces. Now, it's not a case of, well, then everything has to be beige and brown. You can still have pops of colour. Of course you can. But just have a think. Turn off the light. I've had some conversations with autistic adults, and one lady, she said to me, just turning the lights off just takes away the stimulus. She just changes completely the impact on me and my ability to learn. Blinds up, curtains open, remove the stuff off the window and allow the natural light to come in. Strip back your space. Have a space within either your earlier space, your childminding setting, or your classroom that is a place where our children can retreat to decompress, to calm, to regulate, to just take themselves off for a minute and breathe when things have got too much. And when those are in classrooms, our children can then come back when they're ready, and therefore they're then ready to learn because they've taken that moment for self-regulation that has made a massive difference on their ability to learn. Include movement. Our children are not moving enough. I was observing in a classroom a couple of years ago, and the teacher did a 40-minute lesson to a year 3 group on deforestation. and wondered why we had the behaviours that we did in some of our neurodivergent children in the classroom. We had a TA telling them to sit down, listen, look at the front, teachers talking. They need to move. They need to move their bodies. So involve, and it's not something, that child needs a movement break, sensory break, take them out. Everybody, let's all move. Because you know what it's like, even working from home, when you've been sat down for too long, your brain just switches off, you're gone. Or your watch bleeps and tells you to move, get up, move around, get the body moving, get the blood flowing. So yeah, movement, environment, understand what your children need from you. Understand the triggers that you're seeing that are impacting your children's behaviour and do something about them. Understand sensory needs, understand the 8 sensory systems that we have, not just 5, proprioception, interoception, vestibular system. Read up on those, know the impact of those sensory systems on our children's behaviour, and support our children that are seeking or avoiding in terms of those needs. Read up, learn more, do more, understand more, seek support, open your eyes a little bit to those differences, and that you actually can impact on those that can make a massive difference for your children.
Introducing Cash Alumni Plus membership, your passport to exclusive features and professional development opportunities. You can now choose to elevate your membership experience and enjoy a host of enhanced benefits, including a brand new comprehensive library of e-learning modules and cashback discounts worth up to an average of £329 in savings per year. Expand your circle, exchange ideas, and stay ahead of industry developments with access to networking events both online and in person. Plus, with access to employment and career guidance sessions, you can confidently navigate your career path with personalised advice and job opportunities tailored just for you. Upgrade to Cash Alumni Plus membership for only £25 per year to access all these features and more. Head over to your member homepage or use the Join Us link in the show notes for this episode to find out more.
That idea of having somewhere where kids can go to opt out, to have some time away, because I was a huffy kid. I wasn't going off to stomp my feet. I was taking myself out of a stressful situation and giving myself some time to calm down. Or that idea that the classroom being full of visual noise, but you're still going to want us to look at you. Why is all that stuff on the wall if you want me to look at you? I'm reading the alphabet. It's great. Why are you suddenly so interested?
We might have children that want to sit and bounce on an exercise ball. We might have a child that wants to sit on a chair the wrong way round and lean on it so they can put some pressure on themselves for proprioceptive input. Allow the movement, and then I can concentrate, and then I can listen. Pop an exercise band around the front legs of my chair that I can push my legs up against, again, giving me some proprioceptive input. I'm then going to concentrate on what you're telling me at the front of the classroom. It's not about, well, you've got to have this fandangled sensory room, or you've got to have one-to-one, or it's just these small things that you can bring into your classroom or you can take out of your classroom that can have a massive impact for the better.
And I think, again, if you think about the way that we work at work, like, nobody thinks anything of the person sitting doodling in the meeting, because they know that if you're sitting doodling or making notes, that you are listening. Magda actually bought me an amazing cup a couple of years ago for Christmas. And it says, I might look like I'm listening to you, but I'm actually thinking about chickens. And the majority of the time, that holds true. If I look like I'm listening, I'm probably actually concentrating really hard on looking like I'm listening.
And I'm not then able to take on anything that you are telling me because I don't feel safe where I am right now. Going back to talk about the carpet, it might not be the colour. It might be the fact that I have a sensitivity to touch. Summertime, our children are in, little summer dresses or shorts, and that carpet feels really itchy and it's a bit dirty and it's a bit grubby. And I've got a sensitivity to touch, and I'm doing everything to just sit here and comply when my body is telling me, get out, run. So I can't listen to anything you are telling me. So then I can't go and do the task that I need to do after because I haven't heard a word of anything that you've told me. And I can't answer the question that you've just fired at me because I haven't listened to a word you've said, because I'm doing everything just to comply, because I know that if I don't, I'm going to get in trouble or I'm going to get called out for it.
So I'm just going to try my best, and I'm going to get wrong anyway, but at least I'll have tried.
Exactly. Just open your eyes and ears and read the room, read the children in front of you, Why are they doing that? Like you say, be curious. Why are they doing that? Why are they not doing that? Why have they not been able to ask me for help? Why have they not completed that task? Why is that child not able to come in and join this group activity? Not they should be, and why not? So therefore sanction or something removed, or just why? And think that there might be something I can do that will allow that child to experience success with this task.
What motivated you to start the business? What did you think was the kind of key missing thing in the sector?
It was people getting in touch with me saying, you've got an autistic son, haven't you? I think we've got one of those as well. What can we do? How can we? And for me, obviously, it's all kind of started within early years. Early years for me, as much as we can talk about the challenges, there is still this huge passion to do it right. And this huge drive to make sure that we do right by our children. So it came from people starting asking me, because they knew my experiences, Cheryl, could you come and help? Could you just come and see this child and let me know what you think and maybe how we can better support that child? Or, Cheryl, I've got this family and they need a bit of support. Or we want help. We've reached out to other people. We've reached out to local authority. We've reached out and we're not getting anything. Some local authorities won't come out if the nursery is sitting on a good. They'll only have the capability and the staffing and the funding to go and see those that have got an RI or inadequate, or there's a waiting list to see somebody. What can we do? There is a movement in terms of neurodiversity and understanding neurodivergence, and there is this push now. And I think the more that we are getting late diagnosed adults, the more the conversation has come to the forefront. I'm on a couple of advisory boards for different things. And whenever you have a group of people within the sector, whether it's CEOs, whether it's government officials, whether it's nursery owners, the kind of challenges that are still in place early years is staffing, funding, and send. And it's always there. So I kind of felt like people were giving me a call to action. Please come and help me. Please come and advise. I like what you're saying and how you're saying it, Cheryl. Can you come and train the staff? Because we want to make sure it's consistently embedded in what we do. And just seeing the struggles that my children have had and kind of saying, do you know what, we need to change this up a bit. Let me maybe come and be a bit of a disruptor and change things. So yeah, that's where it came from.
Have you had any sort of feedback or any sort of success stories, positive, lovely stories that sort of stay with you?
I'm very fortunate that there has been lots. I mean, the most special ones for me that are those that I'm doing a keynote or a seminar or a workshop or a trade. I can do webinars to 250 people and seminars to 250 people, but then I can also go in and train 6 staff in a little preschool. It's the feedback from the parents, those that are educators and parents of neurodivergent children, but it's also those individuals, those neurodivergent educators that a little bit like you, Dawn, kind of have come to me afterwards or sent me a message afterwards and said, I wish there was somebody like you when I was younger, somebody like you that understood me, that would fight for me. That for me is I've had impact. And somebody said that, there needs to be more of you to support children today. That keeps me going. I've had nursery owners, just in terms of finances, have been self-funding one-to-one staff for the children because they can't get the funding from anywhere else. The child's not eligible for funding, but they want to keep the child there. They want to do right by the child, so they funded. I've gone in, supported the team, trained the team, worked with the team, and that child no longer needs a one-to-one because we've set the right space for them. So from a financial perspective, the nursery owner is saying, thank you very much. But that child is now able to stay where they are in a familiar space with trusted adults because the whole team have shifted their thinking. And just where you've gone into a setting and you've seen a very, very distressed child and you've just changed people's thinking. So then you get the feedback that says, actually, this child's now thriving. And they'll send me pictures. He's no longer doing this, or he's now able to be with us 9 till 3, whereas it was a reduced timetable before, or reduced time with us. And just thinking about my own children, my eldest has finished his GCSEs. I never thought he'd get there, let alone finish them. And on Monday, he went off to prom. I mean, I cried my eyes out. And he has friends that he went to prom with. There's a success story right there.
For me, in there, the most exciting thing about what you just said about some of that feedback was that idea that there was a child who was getting one-to-one support, and I suppose in that sense was seen as a problem to be solved, and then actually going in and making things better for all of the kids and making the environment better for everyone, not only meant that that child was no longer a problem and was able to be one of the other children, and everybody's lives have gotten better because of that.
And I also hear as well, we can't do it for one, because I've had this said to my children, both my children. If we do it for one, we'll have to do it for everybody else. In terms of legislation, equality, equity, we need to provide these differences to support our children. It's about ensuring that individual needs are being met. We also need to have conversations, certainly when we're with our children, around difference. We have open questions and open conversations. If we had a wheelchair user in our classroom or in our early years space, or a child with a visual impairment or hearing impairment, or a child that's fallen over and has got their arm or leg in a cast, we would have those conversations about the differences that you can see. Because our neurodivergent differences are hidden, it's like, oh my God, we can't have those conversations because they're around the brain. And no, because my eldest looks like other 16-year-olds, he's expected to behave and respond like other 16-year-olds, but he doesn't. So we need to have those conversations. And if we can have those conversations with our children in early years, then surely we are going to create a generation of individuals who understand and see difference as okay. As different as our hair and our fingerprints, so are our brains. Some of our children are going to need the fidget. Some of our children are going to need the sensory breaks. Some of our children are going to need to sit on an exercise ball for story time. Doesn't mean every other child is going to, because we have conversations about, well, that's what Johnny needs to be able to have and enjoy the story with us. And children are accepting of that, like they would be with a child who is a wheelchair user. They would be accepting of that.
Even thinking about that from that other idea, like, if we do it for one, we'll have to do it for everyone. If everyone's going to benefit from it, and everyone's going to concentrate better if they've got an exercise ball, why is that a bad thing?
Exactly.
Is there any sort of core advice you'd give to somebody who's starting their career in education, sort of keeping all those things we said in mind, and you think that our audience needs to hear?
Difference is okay in terms of just a blanket statement. I've been doing this 30 years. I am still learning. I am still taking on new information. Don't ever stop learning. In terms of neurodiversity, the term neurodiversity is different, is understanding that we do have those that are neurotypical. We do have those that are neurodivergent. Neuro being brain, diversity being difference. Understand that that will be your cohort of children. So be that curious educator. Be that responsive educator that sees, really open your eyes, that sees our children and acknowledges our children, accepts our children, affirms our children to enable that child to experience success and to thrive. Come and find me. I'm on Instagram and Facebook. I have a Facebook group. I have a Facebook page. I have a podcast myself, not your typical podcast. I have guests on our neuroaffirming practitioners, educators, parents of children with different neurodivergent conditions. So come and join me on there. Reach out to me, ask questions. If you don't know, or if you want to know, ask. Like people say all the time, no question is a silly question. Connect, join the conversation, and do what you can. Read lots, learn lots to just shift that thinking, shift that perspective in terms of your practice, in terms of your environment, in terms of your connection with children. Make it neuroaffirming. And if you're not really sure what that means, find out and reach out and learn more.
Thanks for listening to Podcash. If you enjoyed it, please follow or subscribe on your podcast app so you never miss an episode. You can also watch many of these conversations by heading over to cashalumni.org.uk and going to the CPD and best practice section of the site. That's cashalumni.org.uk.